So I've been asked to come and share my experience adopting ProjectWise at my previous firm. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about my background and experience with ProjectWise, as well as the business issues that we faced. And then we're going to talk about how ProjectWise solved those business issues, and then finally how we justified our investment in ProjectWise and ultimately achieved between a 1.5 and 3.5 times ROI on our investment. And then again, at the end, we will have time for a Q&A. So a little bit about my background. I am traditionally a civil designer, and I worked primarily with AutoCAD Civil 3D. So I became the CAD coordinator for a company called Kennedy Jenks Consultants, where I was in charge of technical support, licensing, as well as advancing the company's design technologies. So at the time, we had a lot of technical roadblocks in our organization, and the Office of the CIO asked us to explore possible solutions. ProjectWise was selected as a platform on which we'd build our data environment, and I was assigned to oversee its implementation and continued success. And I actually had the opportunity to speak with one of my former colleagues last week, and the company is now at a state where ProjectWise is now mandated on all design projects. So as an application engineer, I sit between the client, our sales team and marketing team, as well as development. And I support users as an account advocate and a source of technical information and experience. And I also provide demonstrations to our sales team, and I relay product feedback from our users to our development team. So before we get deep into ProjectWise, I want to give you a little bit of background about the company because I think it's important to understand what we were doing and where we were located because they were all factors that played into the performance issues that we were facing. So Kennedy Jenks is a mid-sized civil and environmental engineering firm of about 400 to 500 employees. They're based primarily on the West Coast of the United States, but they also have satellites that extend through the Midwest and central United States all the way to the East Coast, and 2 offices in Hawaii. So we had 2 business units. One of them was focused on water infrastructure, and the second business unit was focused on environmental remediation and planning. So my business unit was the water infrastructure business unit, and we focused primarily on pipeline design, general water infrastructure, well equippings, as well as enormous treatment plant designs and rehabilitations, and massive multi-municipality water reuse programs, primarily in Southern California. So let's take a look at some of the issues we were facing. By far, the worst issue was latency, specific to CAD drawings. So opening and saving CAD drawings across long distances was a killer for us. We had a Windows file server, often 2 Windows file servers in each office location. So projects that would start in one office, individuals would set up the file server in that location, and anybody on an extended team in another location would often have to connect to that server. So designers would access anywhere from 1 to 10 different servers each day with varying levels of performance. I can actually show you a map of what that performance actually looked like. So our headquarters was in the Central California area in San Francisco, and we had a few offices close to it that had the greatest performance. As you went further north or further south, individuals kind of lost performance, and it could range from very successful one day to an incredibly poor experience waiting several minutes to hours to open files. As you got further and further away from our headquarters, that performance severely degraded, and it was almost impossible for anyone east of Colorado or in Hawaii to access documents in California, Oregon, or Washington. So another issue was that we created data silos for ourselves. and an enormous amount of data duplication. So because we shared work across the entire organization, we were constantly backing up different design groups in different areas. We would often have to make copies of documents on our local office server so that users could get their work done. We also found that working in a WAN environment added to a lot of instability for CAD applications. So personally, and this isn't a bash on AutoCAD, it was a network issue. I would crash AutoCAD upwards of 20 to 30 times a day trying to access files from San Diego that were stored in Sacramento. And it's not that enormous of a distance, but it was brutal. It was terrible. So we had a lot of rework. We lost a lot of unsaved work when documents would crash, and we spent a lot of time recovering corrupted files. So we were very aware of the risk that was associated with this data duplication, but it was a necessity to get work done. We had a few options. We could destroy a budget or incur an enormous overhead because of the poor performance, or we could get the projects done on time and budget, but with a huge amount of risk associated with data duplication. And then it turns out that we also wasted a lot of time in validating the correct versions of documents as they got moved from one location to another. So it was also common for designers to begin working on content and then weeks later find out that they started with the incorrect materials. Another issue that we had was standard conformance. Each office had their own CAD servers that contained all of their plot configurations, as well as their own method for storing project folders, naming project files, and it became an enormous hassle. If I had to connect to an office server that was in the Midwest and they had a different way of filing documents, I had to learn their method for filing documents and then locate my documents after that. So it was not a good situation. So we set out to test ProjectWise, and ProjectWise was initially selected for two reasons. One, we had a familiarity with the platform from working with clients who relied on the technology, and two was the ease of setup through Bentley's cloud-hosted offering. So Bentley procures the cloud servers, they managed all of the updates, they managed all the database maintenance, and that was very attractive to us because we were interested in getting up and running with a data management solution as quickly as possible. So we selected a pilot project, and it happened to be a plant rehabilitation in Central California. The team consisted of about 40 members, and it included all of our in-house design disciplines. And we had civil, electrical, P&ID, structural. We had most disciplines in-house. Another reason that we selected this project was because we knew that it would have a dispersed team. There would be people in the Midwest doing environmental studies. There would be people in Southern California doing civil design work, and then there were people in Washington and Oregon doing the process design. We also wanted to test its capabilities, ProjectWise's capabilities, working with AutoCAD and AutoCAD P&ID, and to add to that list, AutoCAD Civil 3D. So this team actually quickly grew to 60 team members a few weeks after the project got started. It was just, we determined that more people needed to be brought on board, and most of that team included project administrators, word processors, as well as marketing staff. So let's talk about how ProjectWise solved some of our problems. So it really solved the core of our technical issues with a caching system and a Delta file transfer system. And I'll get into the Delta file and caching system in a second here with a demonstration clip that I put together. So ProjectWise relies on a server-client relationship. You launch an application on your desktop or whatever sort of workstation that you're on, and it connects to a data source in the Microsoft Azure cloud. Again, this is a database, and it is a replacement for the Windows file system. So when a user accesses a file, they can select Open, and the document is actually copied from the data source in the cloud to their local workstation. And the Delta file transfer system is pretty unique in that if I create a document, it saves back to the server, and anytime I add information to that document, subsequent access to that document, only the information that is changed is transferred back and forth. So if I create a 100 megabyte file and then later I go and I add 10 megabytes worth of changes to it, only that 10 megabytes is what is going to be transferred. So you get an enormous amount of time saving and resource saving by only transferring what needs to be moved. So when you're finished working, you save a document like normal, and then you would go ahead and close the application. So as soon as the application is closed, the user has a few options. This dialog forces the user to make a conscious decision about what to do with the changes that they just made. Excuse me. My voice today. So here the user can check the document back in, at which point it will release the user's lock on that document, as you see, and it'll transfer those changes back to the server. Again, this is the same workflow on repeat here. I can go ahead and save and close this document, but this time I'm going to select free. Free allows the user to discard any changes and release their lock on that document. So a couple of bonuses here that we received. Before ProjectWise, we had an average file operation of about 3 to 4 minutes, but it was also not uncommon for files to take 30 minutes and over an hour, especially large surface files that we worked with in Civil 3D, and it was an enormous time sink. So oftentimes too, the applications would freeze, timeout, and crash after spending 30 minutes waiting for it to save back to a server that was 500 miles away. So users were spending on average of 1 to 2 hours a day just waiting for documents to open and save. So the Delta file transfer and the caching system brought this down to an average time of about 30 seconds per file operation, regardless of where a user sat every day. Another thing to note, and I forgot to mention in the previous slide, is that ProjectWise is always caching by default. There's two caching systems at play here. One of them is a server caching, which happens on in your office. You can set up a caching server, and it's also caching by default to your working system. So as you access project documents and check them back in, a copy is left on your computer, and then the next time you access it, any changes that come back to you are just that delta that I had spoke of before. So again, prior to ProjectWise, we spent an enormous amount of time contacting dispersed team members to find where relevant project documents were located. We had something like 25 or more file servers and more than 20 different CAD servers. And again, these servers were kept separately so that we could easily manage permissions. With ProjectWise, all of the project and CAD servers were consolidated into a single data source. So any user with access credentials could launch ProjectWise, explore from any location, explore from any location as long as they had an internet connection. And because of the Delta file transfer and the local caching systems, users could effectively access even the largest design files from any location. So it's pretty hard to demonstrate the common data environment, so there's no pretty video for this one. But again, we consolidated more than 45 servers into a single data source. And finally, for the first time, we had our CAD and project data in the same place. Moving on. So let's talk about searching inside of ProjectWise. Again, because of all of our data silos, we spend an enormous amount of time searching for the correct documents. And ProjectWise allowed us to be very organized, which made it easy to locate documents. But in the event that somebody couldn't locate the files that they needed, ProjectWise had a large array of searching tools that were available. So in ProjectWise, at the top of the interface, there is a quick search bar, which allows you to use wildcards and logical operators to quickly locate documents. However, if a more detailed search is required, you can right-click on a folder or a project and choose the advanced search tool. And ProjectWise lets you search through project properties, folder properties, by user information, through full text index data from both documents and CAD files, and it even allows you to search through custom metadata that has been defined by your user organization. You can also search geospatially and define documents by their location on a base map. And these searches can also be defined globally or by individuals and saved for future use. So again, the major result of these searching tools was an enormous time saver on the part of our designers, our engineers, our word processors. Everyone was saving time by using these tools. And with the implementation of ProjectWise, it seems that everyone suddenly stopped losing files. So it was a enormous boost to productivity amongst our dispersed teams. Again, because of our data silos and dispersed data, reference file management became a nightmare. The documents were constantly moving from one server to another, and every CAD document had to be opened, and each reference file had to be validated both for its location and that it was the correct version of the document. You could imagine that on a large design set, this would become very time-consuming, and it just destroyed our project budgets. So when you're working with CAD files inside of ProjectWise, ProjectWise takes over the task of managing reference links. If a user moves a reference file from one folder to another, ProjectWise is smart enough to maintain the connection based on unique document identifiers rather than arbitrary file names or locations. ProjectWise also has a dependency viewer, which gives the, let me go back there, which gives the user the ability to, at a glance, understand the relationship among all of their CAD files. So you can run an impact analysis to see if I change this single reference file, what is it going to do to the rest of my references. So in addition to that, ProjectWise also had a reference scanning tool. This tool allows you to take an unmanaged set, say a set that you receive from a client, drag and drop it into ProjectWise, and then run a reference scan, and it will automatically search through all of the drawings and connect all of those reference files. Again, this was an enormous time saver, especially when we were moving active projects from a Windows file server into the ProjectWise environment. So again, time recovered. This is a theme you're going to hear over and over from me. It's the amount of time we saved and the amount of risk that we were previously facing that had been removed in this new system. So let's take a look at my favorite tool in ProjectWise. So I really dislike plotting. I hate sitting there and watching a batch plotter process hundreds of drawings and oftentimes crash halfway through. It's a very frustrating experience. So we were a primarily Autodesk-based firm, so this meant hours of waiting for the publish tool, which was the main plotting tool that we relied on. there was also a very wide range of variation in plotting standards from one office to another. So different offices, because they had siloed data, would have slightly different versions of plot configurations and color tables. We also had very nitpicky engineers, and if something came out with the wrong line weights, it meant rework, and we'd have to go in and correct those issues. And even worse is if we had a client-specified standard that we had to abide by. It was very difficult to make sure that those standards were constantly conformed to. So in ProjectWise, we were able to take all of those plotting standards, define them into profiles, and assign them to projects. I do have a demonstration for this. So in ProjectWise, to generate a PDF, you can right-click a document or a group of documents, and you can choose Create Renditions. Here, I select the profile that I'd like to use. Again, this can be defined by the administrator. I'm going to choose the location where I'd like these files to be saved, and I'm going to go ahead and submit this. When the plotting job is finished, the user receives an email notification, and in this email notification, they have a link to the input files as well as a link to the newly created PDFs. Let's go back. There we go. So when the plot is, the server tools also allow you to configure scheduled plots. So our project managers on the pilot project requested updated PDFs every Monday morning. The auto plot function would run every morning at 12 a.m. and place the documents in a specified folder. So ICS completely reduced the plotting operation to a single-click tool or an automated event. All right, let's talk a little bit about standards. So like I was saying before, our data silos were somewhat crippling. And along with that, project definitions varied wildly from one location to another. And different offices had different ways of setting up their folder structure, as well as different ways of naming documents. So inside of ProjectWise, you have the ability to define project templates and project types. And the project types can contain different sets of properties for those projects, and you can pre-populate them with information specific to project startup. There's also a document creation wizard that allows you to define a set of document naming standards. So here the user can launch the advanced document creation wizard, they can select a seed or template file, and then they are prompted to begin inputting the metadata that is required to create this document. So in the case for our organization, the document names consisted of a project number that was inherited, it could not be changed, a discipline, and then a sheet number or serial number that was automatically generated by ProjectWise in a numerical format. The users could also input information like the title block information for these drawings, as well as who designed them. And again, all of this information is highly configurable. You can customize this to whatever your organization's needs and requirements are. I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit. So again, when I open a CAD drawing, I can also open my document properties, and I can compare the information in the document properties to what is being automatically transferred into this title block. And these title block integrations work for AutoCAD and its verticals, MicroStation and its verticals, as well as Microsoft Office documents. So we had an enormous boost in standards conformance. All of the projects were always defined to standards, and we completely automated the title block management issue that we had in the past. You never had to open a drawing to see what its contents were. You always knew at a glance, and it was very easy to push new standards to the entire company. So after our pilot, users began to request ProjectWise for all of their projects. Our team was tasked with justifying a full-scale implementation, and we had to conclude on the pilot and calculate ROI and value for our firm. So quantifying the savings was actually a little bit difficult because most of our savings were tied to hidden costs, right? Inefficiency of the old system and wasted time that we now recouped. But we also realized that even at a 1% increase in efficiency, we would have an enormous savings on revenue hours. So on average, during our pilot, users saved around 2 to 3 hours per day, and that was upwards of 100 hours per day across the whole team and more than $10,000 a day for the whole team. So we came up with a savings model. And the savings model estimates hours saved each week based on the number of staff, billing rates, hours lost, and it assumes that 100% of the hours lost are recouped in ProjectWise. So our business unit director approached us, and he wanted to have an extremely conservative case that was very easy to defend. So we had 60 users who saved a half an hour per week at a billing rate of $100 an hour, and it was easy for us to justify that we had more users who saved more time than that, and we had way higher billing rates than $100 an hour. And in this scenario, ProjectWise still paid for itself more than 3.5 times per year. So we've adapted this savings model, and we do have it available. So if you'd like to receive this, there'll be a poll shortly to be contacted by sales, and we can provide this to you. But it allows you to go through and input the annual cost of an employee, your split between the different types of licenses, as well as the time that you lose in efficient processes in these different fields. Also, online, we have a simpler version of this tool to kind of help you quickly estimate what sort of savings and ROI you can generate using ProjectWise. So again, my main themes of this are ProjectWise helps you reduce frustration and it helps you reduce risk. And that's pretty much all I have. That's been my main theme. It's really about getting the headaches off of your designers and eliminating or at least reducing the amount of risk associated with your projects.